Okay, this guy right here. That is Prince Kaboo. And you probably don't know about him. But if you do, you'd know him as Samuel Morse. So Prince Kaboo was born in Liberia in a small tribe called the Kru. The Kru, yeah, the Kru. That's how you say it, K-R-U. I think that's how you say it. He was a prince, son of a chief, and in their little tribe there was conflicts and stuff like that with other tribes. And around the age of 14 to 17, we don't know for sure because they didn't have calendars and all that type of stuff in their village, he was captured by one of their tribes, their enemy tribes, and he was held hostage. And since the tribes that would surround them would come and attack their village and raid them, then they would they would take a hostage and they would ask for payment for those hostages. If the payment wasn't sufficient to the chief, then they kept holding them and they kept torturing them. And so he had to work in their fields and was tortured and beaten, and none of the payments that his tribe brought satisfied this chief. So it came to a point where even his own dad, the chief, offered his sister, and Kaboo said, no, you can't do that. I'll stay here. I won't let her be taken. And so after that, they didn't have anything else to bring. So it turns out that the tribe that had captured him decided to bury him alive. They were going to bury him alive. And this is a 15, 16-year-old guy. Like, his whole life is ahead of him, and it's ending. Why? Because of the fights over food and land. And as he's getting buried, we don't know what he thought. Maybe he prayed or something like that. But a light shone, a bright light like lightning shone so brightly, and a voice came out of it and said, "Run, Kaboo, run!" And it blinded all his captors, and he just took off running. He'd been beaten and beaten for hours, left half dead. But suddenly he had this amazing energy just to take off and go. He ran and ran as fast as his legs could take him. And so he finally found a place where he could like hide in a log. And then obviously the people started chasing, looking for him. They couldn't find him. And the next morning he woke up in that log. He came out and the light was still there with him and guided him hundreds of miles to the nearest settlement where there was actual like plantations. He ended up on his coffee plantation. The first person he meets is someone from his tribe. Out of all the coincidences that could have happened, that's the person he meets and helps him get a job, and he gets introduced to people who are not like tribesmen. And that Sunday he goes to church, and it just so happens, all these happenings happen, that the lady there, the missionary there, was sharing the story about Paul on the road to Damascus. You know, where he's riding that horse and he's desperate to go capture these Christians because he feels like God's called him to destroy the Christians and that they're wrong. And then boom, Jesus hits him with lightning. Well, not really, but Jesus' light shines and he falls off that horse and he is struck blind, and God says, "Why are you persecuting me?" Kaboo got up. He was like, "Wait a second, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me." No one told him that he was supposed to just come up and interrupt the sermon. And he shares his story about how this light, this voice that Paul heard had happened to him and rescued him. And in that moment, he got introduced to Jesus and gave his life to God. And from then on, he wanted to pursue God with all his heart. And he started reading the Bible, learning English. And one thing that he did is he didn't have his father. He didn't have his mother with him because, yeah, he couldn't go back to his tribe. But he started referring to God as his father. And whenever a situation came up, he said, "Oh, I need to go talk to my father." He lived really like Jesus, where whatever he did, he needed to go through his father. And so he soaked up all he could from this missionary lady. Her name's Lizzie something. You guys can go. And learning all he could, learning English, learning the Bible. And at night, he would sometimes stay up and lose sleep, just talking out loud to his father. It wasn't just like, "Oh, dear God, I pray." He was like, "God, hey," talking to God out loud to his father. And so much so that his co-workers would say, "Go talk to God in the jungle. We need to get some sleep." And so he just consume his time talking to God and learning about him, until the point where he started learning about the Holy Spirit, and he wanted to learn more, but the missionary didn't have any more to teach him. So she said, "Well, the person who taught me all I know lives in America. His name is Stephen Merritt." And I think that's the place you could go to find more information. He's like, okay, great, I'm gonna go. He's like, no, it's across the ocean, it's a long ways, you can't just go. And he's like, I'm gonna talk to my father. He talks to his father, he hears, yep, go. And so he says, packs his bag and says, I'm going. He didn't know how far it was, but he just followed his father's voice. He ends up going to the coast and meeting some rough, tough, tumbling seamen, you know, the guys who cuss a lot, drink a lot, and punch each other out, and almost kill each other basically the whole time. So he ends up on the ship, and he is terrified because he has not been in water, and he's almost drowning several times. He has seasickness is super bad, and the captain doesn't want him there, but somehow he'd let him. And one day, the captain was so mad, he was about to punch Samuel Morris. And Samuel Morris just gets down on his knees and starts talking to his father. It makes this captain remember back to his youth when he was on a farm in New Jersey, learning about God from his mother, and it kind of just softened his heart. He gave his heart to the Lord, and from then on, one by one, the men on that ship who were from all over the world, but you know, they were the bottom in morals. They were terrible guys, began to turn their lives to God because of the boldness and kindness and love of Samuel Morris. Which, okay, how he got the name Samuel Morris is because when he became a Christian, he wanted to make a statement that he had changed, that he had given his life to God. And so instead of being called Kaboo, he got his name changed to Samuel Morris, which was a man who would help the missionary get to Africa. So one instance while he's on the ship, there is this Malaysian seaman who he's got real mad, and he has this cutlass, which is a big knife, and he's starting to use it to try to fight people. And Samuel Morris steps in the way and says, don't hurt anybody, don't kill anybody. And he's about to come and slice down Samuel Morris, and his arms get seized in the middle of the air, and he goes, whoa, 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 whoa. And from then on, the power of God was really shown in that situation, and the whole crew started turning to God, listening to Samuel Morris. And at the end, they were a loving crew who loved each other, who all had given their lives to Christ. And when he got to America, it was a peaceful ship. He gets to America and he starts to have all these little encounters with different people. And he wants to learn so much about the Holy Spirit, a lot about God. He only has a short time in America because he only lived to 28 years old. But everywhere he went, he wanted to share about Jesus. He wanted to learn more about Jesus. His goal of coming to America was learning about the Holy Spirit. But really, in his pursuit of the Holy Spirit was using him. People got saved. He ended up going to this university called Taylor. And through his impact of leading students to the Lord, of preaching the gospel, of encouraging them in their faith, of him standing in his faith very boldly and putting God above everything else, people started to recognize and turn to God, and people would come in crowds to hear him speak. But one winter, he gets sick and ends up in the hospital because he hadn't buttoned himself up, so he was kind of cold, and it got worse. And since he's from Africa, he's not used to it. He ended up going to the hospital, and he was there for a few days and passed away. Everyone was shocked because he was only in his 20s. But his goal when he came to America was to learn about the Holy Spirit more and go back to Africa. Out of his time there really being used by the Holy Spirit, even though he came to study about the Holy Spirit, he impacted the people around him in that college so much that several of them chose to go to Africa and become missionaries in his stead. So instead of just one person going, it doubled in fruit and multiplied and ended up becoming more missionaries who went to Africa. And still to this day, that university actually ended up on the map because of his story. And that university didn't go bankrupt because of his faith and boldness, and the people who decided to go there because they heard his story. So what I find is that time is not really a constraint. There's this verse in the Bible that Jonathan says to his armor bearer. You can find this in Samuel, where he says, God can do anything he wants, whether with a little or with a lot. This is paraphrasing. Jesus only had 3 years that he was doing stuff. Samuel Morris only had like around the same time 3 to 5 years of him doing, like, as a Christian and doing missionary work. So it's not that, but it's us living our lives fully surrendered to the Lord. And I know that that's a crazy thing. It's something I pray and God use me, because I don't want to waste this life that he's given me. But time is not a matter to God. It's just what you do with it, if you listen to him and let him lead you. And yeah. So that's Samuel Morse. Go study more about him. There's videos online, all that cool stuff. But Samuel Morse, the young man who changed the university and changed his country.